What if I told you the next episode of House of the Dragon isn't just another chapter in the war, but the episode that could change the fate of Westeros forever? What if one decision, one betrayal, or one unexpected alliance is about to ignite? A fire that even dragons cannot control. And here's the biggest question of all. What if the person everyone believes will win the Iron Throne is actually the one most likely to lose everything? Before we dive into today's breakdown, I want every House of the Dragon fan watching this video to answer one question in the comment section. Who do you believe will ultimately sit on the Iron Throne? Will it be someone from Team Black, someone from Team Green? Or do you think George R.R. Martin still has one shocking twist waiting that nobody sees coming? Take a second and leave your prediction below, because by the end of this video, you might completely change your mind. If you've been following House of the Dragon since the very beginning, then you already know one thing: nothing in this story happens by accident. Every conversation matters. Every glance between two characters can hide a secret, every alliance comes with a price, and every victory creates a new enemy. That's exactly why Episode 2 has fans so excited. Not because we expect non-stop dragon battles, but because history has shown us that the quiet moments often lead to the biggest disasters. Think back to some of the most unforgettable moments in the series. They didn't always begin with swords clashing. Sometimes they began with a whisper, a private meeting, a promise, a lie, and only later did those moments explode into bloodshed. That is exactly the feeling surrounding Episode 2. The kingdom is no longer simply divided. It is becoming consumed by suspicion. No one fully trusts anyone anymore. Every council meeting feels like a battlefield. Every messenger could be carrying peace or the beginning of another massacre. And that raises a terrifying question. What if the next major attack isn't launched by dragons at all? What if it begins with betrayal? Because throughout the history of Westeros, kingdoms have rarely fallen because of their enemies alone. More often, they collapse from within. Friends become rivals. Family becomes the greatest threat. Loyalty disappears, and ambition replaces love. Could Episode 2 finally bring us to that breaking point? One thing that makes House of the Dragon so unpredictable is that no character is completely safe. Power changes people, grief changes people, fear changes people. Even the most honorable characters can make terrible decisions when they believe they're protecting their family. And that's why this next chapter feels so dangerous, not because of what we already know, but because of what we don't. Imagine receiving information that could decide the future of the realm. Would you tell the truth, or would you hide it to protect the people you love? Now imagine that same choice being made by someone with dragons at their command. One lie could start a war, one secret meeting could destroy an entire house, one act of revenge could change history forever. That's the tension surrounding this episode. Every decision feels heavier than ever before. Every conversation could become the spark that lights another fire across Westeros. And perhaps the most dangerous thing isn't the dragons in the sky. It's the growing belief among every powerful family that they can still control what happens next. But history has taught us something very different. Once the dance of the dragons truly begins, no one controls it. It controls everyone. And that's what makes this episode so fascinating. It isn't just about who wins the next battle. It's about who makes the next mistake. Because sometimes the smallest mistake creates the greatest tragedy. As we continue, pay close attention to the characters who appear calm. In House of the Dragon, the quietest player in the room is often the most dangerous. The person speaking the least may already be several moves ahead. So let me ask you another question. If you were forced to choose between protecting your family and protecting the kingdom, which would you choose? There's no easy answer. And that's exactly why this story continues to captivate millions of viewers. Every choice has consequences. Every victory comes at a cost. Every act of revenge creates another cycle of revenge. And as we move deeper into Episode 2, one thing becomes increasingly clear: the dragons may dominate the skies, but the true battle is being fought inside the hearts of the people who command them. Because before kingdoms fall, trust falls first. And when trust disappears, war becomes inevitable. But here's where things become even more interesting. There are growing theories that one conversation in this episode could become more important than an entire dragon battle. A single meeting, a single warning, a single decision that may completely reshape the future of the Seven Kingdoms. The question is, who will make that decision? And will they realize its consequences before it's too late? Because in Westeros, the most dangerous words are often not shouted across a battlefield. They're whispered behind closed doors. And if those whispers become reality, episode 2 could mark the beginning of an even darker chapter in the Dance of the Dragons. But that's only the beginning. Because there are several hidden possibilities, political moves, and character decisions that could completely change the balance of power, and one theory in particular could redefine everything we think we know about the coming war. We'll break those down in part 2. Now here's the question that nobody seems to be asking. What if the next major battle isn't decided by dragons, but by trust? Throughout the history of Westeros, kingdoms have rarely fallen because they lacked soldiers. They fell because someone trusted the wrong person. Someone believed a promise that should never have been believed. Someone underestimated an enemy who was already several moves ahead. And that's exactly why episode 2 has the potential to become one of the most important chapters of this season. Because every side believes they're preparing for war, but what if the real war has already begun? Not with fire. Not with blood. With information. Think about it. Every raven carrying a message. Every lord secretly choosing a side. Every meeting behind closed doors. Every whispered conversation. These moments may seem quiet, but in House of the Dragon, quiet moments often create the loudest consequences. Before we continue, I want to hear your opinion. If you were one of the great lords of Westeros, which side would you support? Would you stand with Team Black? Would you fight beside Team Green? Or would you refuse to choose a side until the very end? Leave your answer in the comments, because every fan sees this conflict differently. Now let's look at one of the biggest theories surrounding episode 2. There are many fans who believe this episode won't rely on non-stop action. Instead, it may focus on something even more dangerous. Preparation, and preparation can be far more terrifying than battle itself. Why? Because battles eventually end. Preparation creates uncertainty. Every scene becomes unpredictable. Every conversation feels important. Every smile could hide another plan. Imagine two characters sitting across from one another, speaking calmly, appearing respectful, yet both secretly planning how to destroy the other. That's the kind of tension that has always made this series so compelling. You never know who is telling the truth. You never know who is pretending. And sometimes the person who appears the weakest is actually controlling the entire conversation. Now let's talk about dragons. Everyone wants to see dragons in battle. Everyone wants incredible aerial combat. But what if the dragons themselves become symbols rather than weapons? Think about it. A dragon isn't simply power. A dragon is responsibility. A dragon represents legacy. Fear. Hope. And absolute destruction. Every time a dragon takes flight, the entire political landscape changes. One appearance can shift negotiations. One attack can erase generations of history. One mistake can create a war that lasts for years. That is why every decision involving dragons matters. The rulers of Westeros don't simply command creatures, they command consequences. And perhaps that's the greatest burden of all. Now here's another theory that keeps growing among fans. What if someone we currently view as loyal begins questioning everything? Not because they've become evil, not because they've changed sides overnight, but because reality forces them to reconsider their beliefs. House of the Dragon has always explored one powerful idea: perspective. Every character believes they're fighting for the right reason. Every character sees themselves as the hero of their own story. And that's what makes this conflict so tragic. There are no simple villains. There are no easy answers. There are only impossible choices. And those choices become even harder as the cost of war continues to rise. Now imagine being responsible for thousands of lives. Imagine knowing that one command could send families into battle, one signature on the letter, one order to attack, one refusal to negotiate. Could change the future forever. Would you hesitate? Or would ambition convince you that victory is worth any price? That's the moral question hanging over every major decision in this story. And I believe episode 2 will continue exploring that conflict, not just who wins, but what victory actually costs. Now here's something else that deserves attention. Silence. Yes. Silence. Some of the most unforgettable moments in this franchise happen when nobody speaks. A long pause before an answer, a meaningful look across a council table, a quiet expression after hearing devastating news. Those silent moments often reveal more than entire speeches. Watch them carefully, because sometimes a character's face tells us everything we need to know. Fear, regret, determination, or perhaps something even more dangerous. A decision has already been made, and nobody else in the room realizes it yet. Now let me ask you another question. Who do you believe is making the smartest moves politically? Not the strongest, not the bravest, the smartest. Which character is thinking several steps ahead? Tell me in the comments, because political strategy has always been just as important as military strength. Now let's consider another possibility. What if episode to plants? Clues that won't pay off until much later in the season. House of the Dragon loves long-term storytelling. Small conversations become enormous revelations. Minor details return episodes later with completely different meaning. A simple object on a table, a line that seems unimportant. A warning everyone ignores. These moments often become the foundation of future twists. That's why paying attention matters. The biggest surprise isn't always hidden. Sometimes it's placed directly in front of us. We simply don't recognize it until much later. And that's what makes rewatching this series so rewarding. Every episode feels different once you know what comes next. Now let's discuss the emotional side of the story. War doesn't only destroy castles. It destroys families. Friendships. Promises. Dreams. The greatest tragedy of the Dance of the Dragons has never been the battles alone. It's watching people who once cared about each other become enemies. Watching trust slowly disappear. Watching grief transform to anger. Watching love become revenge. Episode 2 has the opportunity to push those emotions even further. Because every new conflict leaves scars that can't be healed. And those emotional wounds often influence future decisions more than swords ever could. That's what makes House of the Dragon different from many fantasy series. The action is spectacular. The dragons are unforgettable. But it's the emotional consequences that stay with the audience long after the episode ends, and I think that's exactly what this chapter is building toward. Not simply another confrontation, but a moment where relationships begin changing forever, because once a bond is broken, it's almost impossible to restore, and once revenge becomes the only goal. Everyone loses something, but we're only halfway through our predictions. Because in the next part, we'll explore the biggest hidden theories surrounding episode 2, discuss which characters may gain or lose power, examine possible turning points in the war, and reveal one prediction that could completely change how fans view the future of the Dance of the Dragons. The real game may only be beginning.